So my name is Erika. I don't know if you can see over here, but I've got a couple friends, Jesse and Vicky. They're walking around. Can't see, they're blind, but hopefully we're going to find some way to fix that today, right? So in order to do that, I'm going to take you back in time with me to probably the best time in human history, and that's when Jesus was walking around here, right? And so if you have your Bibles with you, if you could turn with me to Mark 10, we're going to start in verse 32. I'll give you guys a minute. You all look beautiful, by the way. It's nice to see from this view. I don't really get to see everybody's faces when I'm sitting down with my back turned to you. You look stunning. I love your Crocs, Grandma. Okay. So the title for this part says, Jesus a third time predicts his death and resurrection. It says, now when they were on the road going up to Jerusalem, and Jesus was going before them, and they were amazed. And they followed, and as they followed, they were afraid. Then he took the 12 aside again and began to tell them the things that would happen to him. Behold, we're going up to Jerusalem, and the Son of Man will be betrayed to the chief priests and to the scribes, and they will condemn him to death and deliver him to the Gentiles. And they will mock him and scourge him and spit on him and kill him. And the third day he will rise again. And then it says, greatness is serving. Then James and John, the sons of Zebedee, came to him saying, Teacher, we want you to do for us whatever we ask. And he said to them, what do you want me to do for you? They said to him, grant us that we may sit, one on your right hand and the other on your left in your glory. But Jesus said to them, you do not know what you ask. Are you able to drink the cup that I drink and be baptized with the baptism that I am baptized with? They said to him, we are able. So Jesus said to them, you will indeed drink the cup that I drink, and with the baptism I am baptized with, you will be baptized. But to sit on my right hand and on my left is not mine to give, but it is for those for whom it is prepared. And when the 10 heard it, they began to be greatly displeased with James and John. But Jesus called them to himself and said to them, you know that those are considered rulers over the Gentiles lord it over them, and their great ones exercise authority over them. Yet it shall not be so among you, but whoever desires to become great among you shall be your servant, and whoever of you desires to be first shall be slave of all. For even the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life a ransom for many. So now we've set the scene. These aren't the verses we're going to stay in today, but Jesus has explained what's going to happen. We know that they're headed to Jerusalem. We know that they're leaving from Jericho. We know that Jesus was fully cognizant about what was going to happen to him. He was walking to his death. No matter how long it was going to take, that's where he was headed, and he knew that he was. And so I want you to think in that moment, like, this is what Jesus was walking toward. Okay, he knew that. Can you imagine the fear that he must have felt? I mean, when we were all getting ready this morning, we knew that we were going to come to church and spend time together, and so we were probably excited, maybe a little tired. I know I didn't sleep last night, but we knew that we were coming to something good. And on the other side of the spectrum, Jesus knew that he was walking into something that was going to be horrible, beyond anything that we could imagine, because he'd never done any wrong, and it was going to happen to him anyway. And so I just want you to put yourself in his shoes for a moment. If you were struggling, knowing that you were walking to your death, how would you feel? Would you really want some random person to come up to you on the street and bother you? No. I know that even when I'm in a bad mood for silly things, like people come and talk to me, and I'm just like, oh, God, why? Right? And so Jesus, walking to his death, knew where he was going. Keep that in mind. So I would be on autopilot. Absolutely, I would be horrified. Jesus was God, of course, but he was also man, and so the same fear that you and I would feel, you know he was feeling that too. I get nervous enough like going to the doctor, not walking to my own crucifixion. And so let's continue reading. Actually, before I do that, I want to kind of share something with you. A lot of you know about my testimony with Corbin. Corbin's my son. He's going to be 4 next month. He's the coolest little guy in the entire world. So when I was pregnant with Corbin, actually before I was pregnant with Corbin, I had a couple of miscarriages. One specific one, my grandmother passed away in 2016. And the same week that we lost her, I miscarried twins. And that was extra hard because before she passed away, we had conversations. My grandma had my dad, and then she had his twin brothers. And so it was really exciting that even though we knew that she was going to go, we were able to be excited together about the fact that I was going to have twins too. And we were going to have that to kind of share together. Come closer to my voice, Jess. There you go. And so all I ever really wanted was to be a mom. My dad shared for my birthday picture on Facebook this year. I'm not sure if you guys saw it, but I was walking with my mom with my little stroller with my baby doll in it. Like, all I ever wanted was to be a mom. My sister had my nephew when I was 9, and from that moment, I was just like mama hen. Like, I loved those babies like they were my babies, and at 9 years old, I was wanting to get there and change the diapers and feed them and do all of that stuff. That's all I ever wanted. And so, walking through those miscarriages, that was tough because I was like, okay, God, why does everybody else get to have babies? And I don't. I think I would be a good mom. And so eventually, I got to my pregnancy with Corbin. And it did not go as planned. I thought I was going to love it. I did not love it. I had really severe hyperemesis gravidarum. And so I know this is gross, but I was puking upwards 50, 60 times a day after not eating anything. I was losing weight rapidly. I moved into my parents' house, and I survived on their couch just barely. I could only get up to go to the bathroom, and sometimes I couldn't even do that just to get sick. My mom would have to walk me in there. My parents literally had to watch me become skin and bones. And I had doctors, come to me and tell me that the only chance that I was going to survive was if I aborted my baby. And I was like, well, I'm not going to do that. But I will admit to you guys today that there were moments that I was laying on the bathroom floor in the dark. I couldn't handle light. It made me feel even sicker. I couldn't handle the smell of the porcelain in the bathroom, couldn't handle the smell of the wood floors. Everything made me so sick. And so I was just laying there in silence, and I was like, okay, why was I healthy when I had the miscarriages, but now I'm carrying this baby to term when I'm sick? Of all of the pregnancies that you were going to give me a miscarriage with, why not this one? And I hate admitting that because Corbin is genuinely the best thing that ever happened to me, but there were such dark moments that I was like, why don't you just take this away? I'm not going to be the one to do it, but why don't you? Because it was dark. And I couldn't see as hard as I tried. I couldn't see, this morning he woke up and came and snuggled up on my lap for a few minutes and we prayed together. I couldn't see that. All I saw was the ceiling in my parents' bathroom when I was literally laying there dying. I was kind of blind to what the future was going to hold, and I was confused about why God would allow that to happen to me. And I was angry because why is God allowing this to happen to me? And so I had to get to the point where I just wasn't going to give up. I know what God's word says. I know that it's his will to heal me, and so I'm going to hold him to it. And that was the anger that I reached, where it was like, this is what you said to me, and this is what's happening right now, so we need to figure out what's going on here, but you need to make me better. There was a moment when I was in the hospital, and the same day that they had brought one of their attorneys to me to kind of work on a living will, this doctor told me that I just needed to try harder or my baby and I were going to die. And I was so angry. They'd given me a medication. When I was 3, I was diagnosed with epilepsy. I had a grand mal seizure. And this medication was not supposed to be given to anybody that had ever dealt with any kind of epilepsy before. And they gave it to me. And so it kind of spiraled me worse, and I felt even worse. And I knew for sure I was going to die that night. And I remember my mom had to run home, and she was going to come back and stay that night with me. And I was just laying there, and I was like, God, you need to do this now, because I'm not going to make it. And he did. And so it was, I want you to remember that I was laying in the dark on the bathroom floor, crying, not understanding why God was making me walk through this as much as I wanted Corbin. It should have been easier, right? At least that's what I told myself, but I would go through it 10 times for that boy. And so that brings us to the next part in the book of Mark, where blind Bartimaeus receives his sight. So then they came to Jericho. As Jesus and his disciples, together with a large crowd, were leaving the city, a blind man, Bartimaeus, was sitting by the roadside begging. When he heard that it was Jesus of Nazareth, he began to shout, "Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me." Many rebuked him and told him to be quiet, but he shouted all the more, "Son of David, have mercy on me." Jesus stopped and said, "Call him." So they called to the blind man, "Cheer up, on your feet, he's calling you." Throwing his cloak aside, he jumped to his feet and he came to Jesus. "What do you want me to do for you?" Jesus asked him. The blind man said, "Rabbi, I want to see." "Go," said Jesus, "your faith has healed you." Immediately he received his sight and followed Jesus along the road. So before we really begin to dive into this, I talked to my mom about this a little bit. I was so excited as I read this because I want us to go back to the first half of verse 49, where, keep in mind everything that we've talked about up until this point, Jesus knew where he was headed. He was headed to his crucifixion, and he's walking down the road, and all those emotions that we all agreed that we would be feeling, he was feeling those. But as he's walking down the road, he hears his son call out for him to have mercy on him, and he stops. And just those two words really stopped me in my tracks the other day. Jesus stopped. It's like, I could be in the middle of something, and I hear Corbin call mommy, and he sounds like he really needs me. I will drop whatever I'm doing, and I'll run over to my baby to help him, right? So the same way that we would do that for our child, Jesus heard his son crying out to him, and he stopped. Knowing where he was going, feeling the way that he felt, he still stopped. So imagine that you were there. Take a look at these girls. They're walking around. They can't see me right now. So they have to rely on my voice. They have to rely on your reactions. They have to kind of feel around. They might feel you. They might feel the chair next to you or the table next to you. But they can't rely on their sight right now. So Jesus is passing through. He's walking by him. Bartimaeus is not able to see Jesus. He couldn't rely on his sight to know he was there. And then I imagine all of the other people in the crowd. So we'll just use you guys as for instance. I don't know what kinds of things you guys are walking through at home right now. I don't know if you've just lost somebody that you loved. I don't know if you're dealing with serious health issues. I don't know what's going on. If you just lost a job, I have no idea. But I would imagine that the same people that were there in that crowd, all of those people that were on the road that Jesus was on, all had really big needs, and they just didn't speak up about them. So I'm sure every person in this room has something right now that if Jesus walked in, you would say, "I really need help with this. Like, this is really weighing on my heart. This is really heavy. I don't know if I can carry this by myself." And so all of these people on the road, they all had needs. We all have something in our life that we need Jesus to deal with. And, sometimes we compare it to other people and, well, this person seems bigger than mine, or this person seems bigger than mine, or mine seems bigger than theirs. So why did God help them and not me when mine's so serious? Like, this is life or death, and they just needed, $200 to get them through the next months of rent. Why did he help them and not me? Like, why is that more important? How many times do we say those things? So they wanted Jesus to do the work for them, but they weren't willing to speak up and ask for it. Jesus held the healing in his hands as he's walking down the road. I can't even imagine how all of us would feel if Jesus walked in here right now and we could see him. It would be insane. I'm sure that we would all be trampling each other like, "No, he's mine. Like, I'm touching him first. I need him to deal with this first." right? And so it would have been as simple as all of those people crying out to him the same way that Bartimaeus did, but they didn't. Who knows how long Bartimaeus was blind? We don't know if he was blind from the moment he was born. We don't know if there was some kind of traumatic event that caused him to lose his sight later. We have no idea. We just know that at that moment, he had at least been blind long enough that everybody knew he was blind, that there was credibility behind the way that he acted, Everybody that knows Jess and Vicky knows that they aren't actually blind. They look pretty silly right now, don't they? Can you imagine, somebody just makes up an ailment? Like, people knew that Bartimaeus was actually blind. When he spoke up, crying out to Jesus, the people were still ridiculing him for it. Like, yeah, you have this need, but I have this person dying at home. Yeah, you have this need, but I have a headache today. And that just feels more important to me because I only care about myself, right? And so basically they're telling him, shut up. Your need is not that important. He's not going to, why would he do it for you? You're a blind beggar. Why would he do this for you? What kind of status do you hold? Why do you think that he cares about you? How many times have you been told these things? And how many times, even more importantly, have you thought these things or told these things to other people? Whether you intended to mean it in that way or not, sometimes we really do become so egocentric in the lives that we live here, especially in the Western world, where it's just about what I'm going through. And so I'll tell you, for me, I'll be completely transparent. There have been a lot of moments that I felt that way. Like when I was pregnant with Corbin and, people were getting healed from all kinds of things, I was angry. I was really angry, and I couldn't understand it. Am I happy that they got their healing? Yeah, but what about me? And so there was a point where, on repeat, I don't know if you all know the song "Do It Again" by Elevation. I played that song literally on repeat. To this day, I can't listen to it because I just break out in tears. But on repeat, I mean all day long, all night long, on my laptop, faced away from me because I couldn't stand looking at the light, but it was on repeat. And, sound tended to make me feel even sicker, but I was like, no, I need this playing because I don't want to forget that he can do it again, and he can do it for me, and he wants to do it for me. And so they told Bartimaeus to shut up, but he didn't listen. Because he spoke up and Jesus spoke to him, Bartimaeus was able to see his miracle come to fruition firsthand. He saw the one that performed it for him for the first time too. So sometimes when we place our trust in Jesus, we do it blindly. We say, I don't know how in the world you're going to do this for me, but I'm just believing that you love me and you're going to do it because your word tells me that you do and you will. If we don't believe, we'll never see. And that's what I want you guys to get from this. So they're carrying around right now death, right? So Jesse's pretty close to that chair. There you go, you moved away. Walking toward her death right now, right? Now, as silly as it might look to us, she's obviously got a blindfold on that she could reach up and take off at any point, but she's choosing to leave it on and carry death around, the same way that sometimes we do that. And so up here, I've got two hands. I've got eyes that are working pretty well, especially the left one. My left eye is pretty good. And I've got exactly what they need up here. So Jesse has the opportunity to believe in Jesus, right? To practice outrageous faith like Bartimaeus did, and to call out to him for health and for peace. But instead, she's leaving on her blindfold, and she's walking around and she's carrying death. I've got what she needs right up here, guys. It's right here. Jess, you want to come get it? You want to come get it? Or do you want to walk around sick and anxious? So Jesus is right in front of her. Just keep following my voice. And he wants to give her what she needs, because he already took this. Yeah. He took this, and he gave this to her as soon as she was willing to grab it.
Amen.
So now Vicky has the same opportunity, but she's over there rubbing the thing instead. So she has the opportunity to receive joy and freedom for the first time. But she's leaving on her blindfold and she's carrying around that death. I would assume, after carrying that around for so long, it's comfortable. At first her hand was probably cramping, not used to holding something all the time, but eventually that cramping is going to wear off. It's going to get comfortable. Sometimes we find comfort in our sadness. Sometimes we find comfort in our anger because it takes our focus off of the problem, and that problem most of the time is us. So she's holding it. She looks pretty comfortable. She kind of looks like she's in like a, one of those Matrix movies or whatever. But she has joy and freedom up here. I don't want her to have to walk around blind all day. There you go. Here she comes. I don't want death to be her portion or for her to trip over that chair. There you go. Just keep centered. He made death his portion so that it didn't have to be ours. And I don't know if that hits you guys as hard as that hits me. But death was my portion. And death was Corbin's portion. And he took that from both of us. And now I've got that little guy in that room turning 4 next month. And believe me, he is very much alive. So here's your joy and your freedom. Do you have what Bartimaeus had? If I ask you honestly, do you have what Bartimaeus had? Because Bartimaeus was outrageous in his faith. He was a blind man. He couldn't see if some person was so upset that he was calling out to Jesus that they were just going to come over and pound him. Like, he had no idea. He was taking a huge risk, and he took that risk anyway. Do you have faith when you can't see a thing? Or when it gets dark, do you tell God, well, it's dark and I can't see you, so obviously you're not here? Mom, can you come here? You can just stand right there. You're not standing in front of me.
Yes, I am.
No, you're not. I don't care who says you are. Who says that she's standing in front of me? You're all wrong. I can't see her, so she's not standing there. You're not standing in front of me, but you're not. Now, does this mean that my mom is not actually standing in front of me just because I said that she's not? Because she was. I was manipulating the situation, right? Trying to manipulate all of you. Manipulating her. And sometimes we manipulate ourselves to the point where we don't even know what the truth is anymore. Doesn't mean he's not there. When I was walking through it, I went through with Corbin. My mom was right there. So was Dad. Now, my dad, I know you all know him. I don't know if you know that he's not a very expressive person with his love. I get love taps and love smacks and a quick love ya, super monotone when he walks out of the room. Sometimes I have to say I love you 10 times before he says it back to me, but eventually he gets there. sometimes I have to force him to give me a hug. I know he loves me. But when I was sick, like I was, I saw kind of a side of my dad that I'd never seen before. And he would come home with all kinds of treats. And I remember one day he brought home this huge muffin. It was the size of my head. And he just hoped that I would be able to hold it down and eat it. And there was no way that was going to happen. But just the fact that he did that for me was so sweet. And I'm never going to forget that. You can sit down if you want. Now, thankfully, I knew that physically I was not alone. I had my mom and my dad there. And I had my mom's little dog, Harley Beaner. He, if any of you know Harley, he eats more than any creature I've ever known, even though he's a tiny little miniature Bichon Frise. And he would even go without meals just because he didn't want to leave me up on the couch by myself. He would just snuggle up with me and stay there and would not move. I could have very well convinced myself that I was dealing with that all alone. When I was physically alone laying on the bathroom floor that night when I was crying because I didn't understand why God let me have a miscarriage all those other times, but not this one, and now I'm dying, and the baby might die, and what's the point of all of this? I could have told him, well, you're not here, and at some points I did. Why aren't you here? Why do you tell me that you love me if you're not going to be here? But he was. And no matter how many times we try to tell him that he's not, because we can't see him, because we're choosing our blindness, he's still there. And so when are we going to finally get to the point where we say enough is enough? I'm tired of being spiritually blind. I'm tired of pretending that everything's okay, or convincing myself all the time that everything is okay when it's not, because sometimes we live in denial. I know that that's kind of the road that I mostly go down. If I'm going to experience something, I'm just kind of oh, no, everything's fine. I'm great, thank you. I'm going to get through this. We don't have to talk about it. I don't want to talk about it. Let's just pretend. It's easier that way. And some of you that I know are on the opposite side of the spectrum where it's you just can't talk about it enough. And not either of us are necessarily wrong, but it's how we handle that situation and how we allow God to move in that situation that really matters. So Matthew 15:14 says, "Let them alone, they're blind guides, and if the blind lead the blind, both will fall into a pit." Now imagine that Vicky and Jesse were blindfolded, and we just sent them out onto Oakwood Ave and let them do their thing. We can trust that maybe some people would slam on their brakes as quickly as possible and try not to hit them, but you might just find that one person that had a really rough morning and they're you know what? Slamming on the gas pedal instead, and that would have been the end of that if the blind was leading the blind. And so are we, not only for the sake of ourselves, but for the sake of each other, going to finally say enough is enough? I don't want to live in blindness anymore. I want my vision restored. I want to be able to walk with Jesse and Vicky and know where we're walking, and because we're walking to victory. We're not walking to death anymore because Jesus already went there. And so I don't know what you guys are going through right now. I have no idea. I know of a couple things for a couple people, and I know what I'm walking through personally. I know what my parents go through personally. We have personal relationships with one another, but I don't know what all of you are going through. But I know that it's never just rainbows and butterflies, ever. And I just want to encourage you guys that you're not alone. And I know it sounds cliche. People have said that to me so many times, and I've turned around and rolled my eyes yeah, okay, I'm not alone. Thank you. I've heard that before. But really, my mom was standing in front of me, but I could have tried to convince myself and convince you until I was blue in the face that she wasn't, but she was. And the Bible says, God is near to the brokenhearted. But not only the brokenhearted. He's there with us through the joy. He's there with us through the peaceful times. He's there with us through all of it. But we never, ever, 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 ever have to walk through anything on our own. You know, it gets rough sometimes. I'll be transparent with you guys. It's just Corbin and I at home now. And there are some times that, like, we have a rough day together. Like, he's almost 4. He gets some moods sometimes. He gets some big moods sometimes, and I'm like, okay, I have to really, like, rein myself in, because it would be so easy to react right now. I have to step away for a minute. So there are some nights that after he goes, well, okay, every time he falls asleep, I miss him. Every single time. There's not been a single night in his life where I haven't been like, I want you to wake up. Like, I miss you already. But there are some days that are really hard, and he falls asleep, and I'm just like, oh, okay, God, like, I need you to give me a completely fresh outlook for tomorrow so that we don't go down the same road that we went today. And it would be so easy to just tell myself, well, it's just you. You get to wake up and do this all over again tomorrow. And you did just such a great job today. Like, tomorrow is just going to be wonderful. You know, and I know the moms in here know that feeling. You go to bed and you feel like you just haven't done enough. You haven't done it well enough. You weren't nice enough that one time you got frustrated and you maybe gave your child a look and you're like, I feel so guilty for that. I don't want them to think of me that way. I know we've all been there, at least with somebody in our lives. And it's so easy to just adopt that idea. Like I said, we get comfortable in our sadness. And we get so comfortable just calling ourselves lonely so that we don't give anybody the right to hold us accountable. Right? Because if we don't talk to somebody else about the problem, is it really a problem? If a tree falls in the forest and nobody's around, did it make a noise? It's that same idea. But we're not alone. And we can tell God over and over and over again, and I can't even imagine how that must make him feel. Like, I gave you a brain. Use it. I told you that I'm there. You can try and tell me that I'm not, but I'm literally right here. You know, sometimes when Corbin's about to do something that he's not supposed to do, lately his big thing has been, I love you, Mommy. And then he runs off and tries to do whatever it is that he's supposed to do. And in the middle of doing it, I love you, Mommy. Like, I know I'm not supposed to be doing this, and I know I'm going to get in trouble, but if I tell you I love you, maybe it'll make the reaction, like, a little better. Maybe you'll let me get away with it this time. Like, I've already had 3 cookies today, and you told me I couldn't even have 1, and I'm going for my 4th, but I'm just so cute. He can pretend I'm not there all he wants to, but I'm there, and I see what's going on. And if he's doing something that's going to physically harm him, he better believe he's going to get swept up, and I'm going to walk him away from that, right? I might, like, turn my head and giggle a little bit, like, this little stinker, but I'm right there. Can't convince me otherwise. You can pretend all you want. My mom was standing right in front of me. It's just like when we were in youth group one night, I had an apple, and I cut it all up, and I handed a piece out to the kids, and I told them, don't eat this apple. As you can imagine, a lot of them did. But then I told them that their job was to put the apple back together. And so they're all standing in a circle, and the ones that ate their apple are trying to pretend that the piece that they're holding was theirs so that they don't get in trouble because they really ate their apple. And they're trying to put it back together, but it's not working. And they're looking at me like, what are we supposed to do? And that same night, I told them that the apple was not an apple, it was an onion. And they were like, but I ate it. It was an apple. And the whole night, I went with it, and I was like, no, that was an onion. And the idea for them was, just because somebody says something to you doesn't mean that it's true of you. Just because somebody tells them at school that they're worthless doesn't mean that it's true of them. But it's the same idea that just because we tell God he's not there doesn't mean he's not. Now, Bartimaeus did not choose his blindness. Like I said, we don't know how it happened, whether he was born that way or whether something really traumatic happened that caused that. He didn't choose his blindness, but how often do we choose ours? I asked Jesse and Vicky to wear those blindfolds, and they agreed. They chose to put on the blindfolds. And they chose to continue to keep them on until we brought them up here and said otherwise. There are so many times that I could choose to just say, well, God, you obviously weren't there. Because if you were, why would this have happened? But then I take a step back and I wonder, okay, but if he wasn't there, how much worse could it have gotten? And thank God Jesus was there that day with Bartimaeus. And he was able to bring him to that point where, for the first time ever, he could literally see his healer. But it took him taking that step out on that outrageous, crazy, crazy, crazy faith and ignoring all of the voices around him. And maybe some of those people loved him and they were trying to help him. Like, Bartimaeus, quiet down. Like, he's not going to help you if you're too loud. Who knows? Or was it all, Bartimaeus, you sound stupid. Why would he care about you? Blah, blah, blah. Even well-meaning voices can sometimes steer us in the wrong direction if we listen to them instead of listening to God. And so, how many of you are ready to allow God to refine you and give you the sight back? How many of you have been living life blind? And it's rough. I mean, we're literally living in a time where we've been muzzled. And so we're being muzzled and we're choosing blindness at the same time. And so can you imagine if Bartimaeus couldn't breathe, couldn't speak, couldn't see, could barely hear because the voices were so loud? I mean, that's kind of the way that we've all been existing for the last couple years. But he gives us freedom. We just have to take our blindfolds off. So I know we're going to be sending everybody out to shop and have lunch and all of that stuff, but I just want to invite you guys up if you're ready to let go of your blindness and just have a quiet moment with you and God. I know that all night, I told you guys, I did not sleep all night long. I prayed probably more than I've prayed in a while. I couldn't stop. Part of that was like, oh my goodness, I can't believe I'm going to go speak in front of all of these women. And my dad. Like, come on. I stepped outside this morning and talked to my brother, and he was encouraging me, and I was like, but Dad's going to be sitting right there. I don't know if I'm okay, Travis. And he's like, you're going to do great, kid. But that voice, sometimes it's not even somebody else's voice that's leading us the wrong way. Sometimes it's us. And so if you have been living life in blindness and you don't want to live life in blindness anymore, just go ahead and step up here. I'm not gonna lay hands on anybody or anything. I feel like this is something that's very personal. And that's what God was kind of speaking to me last night. I had to let go of some things that I've been being blind on throughout the night, and that's probably part of the reason I couldn't sleep. That's between you and God, whatever it is. So the altar is yours. And then once you guys are all done, if you want to go ahead and head outside. We're supposed to pray over the food, but if you're going to come up at the altar, that's going to kind of be strange. So just know that I'll be praying for the food on my own quietly. I love you guys.